Hello and welcome back to the Crime Reel. For today's true crime narration, we shall be looking at an extremely distressing case from the 1980s that led to panic and concern amongst female drivers in England and Wales. In 1988, Marie Wilks was 22 years old and had everything to live for. She was married to Adrian, had a 13-month-old son called Mark, and was 7 months pregnant with their second child. The couple lived in Ambleside Drive in Warndon in Worcestershire, and Adrian was a carpenter and part-time cadet instructor. On Saturday the 18th of June 1988, Marie had driven to visit her husband at the Monmouth Territorial Army Base at Simmons Yat in Herefordshire. She was accompanied by her 11-year-old sister, Georgina, and her young son, Mark. As she was driving home from the visit, steam started coming from the bonnet of her 8-year-old Marina Coupe. Marie, who had only recently passed her driving test, pulled onto the hard shoulder of the M50. She left Georgina in the car with Mark and walked about half a mile to an emergency telephone to call for help. It was early evening in the summer months, so it was still broad daylight when she walked alongside the busy motorway. At 7:37 p.m, Marie made a call from the emergency call box on the hard shoulder and was put through to West Mercia Police Headquarters. She explained what had happened and the call was then put on hold. When the operator returned to the call 4 minutes later, Marie was no longer there. Meanwhile, 11-year-old Georgina had become increasingly concerned that her sister had not returned. A family, a man, woman and 3 children, in a light-coloured car stopped to try to help Georgina and Mark. The man looked under the bonnet of the car, but was unable to assist, so continued his journey, adding that if he saw a petrol station, he would try to send help. Georgina walked the half-mile or so to the telephone box, carrying Mark, but she then returned to the car when she could not find her sister. A patrol car had been alerted by the emergency call handler and arrived at the telephone box at 7:59 p.m. The officers found the telephone dangling off the hook. There was no sign of Marie. There was, however, several drops of blood on the ground nearby. Strongly suspecting foul play, a description was immediately circulated. Marie was wearing a pink and white gingham maternity dress at the time of her disappearance. As the search got underway, a police helicopter was brought in, a spotter plane, tracker dogs, and a substantial team of police were involved. Marie's husband, Adrian, said that he knew of no reason why she would just disappear. There has been no trouble at home. The couple were due to celebrate their 3rd wedding anniversary the following Wednesday. At 5:55 p.m. on the 20th of June, 3 miles and less than 48 hours after she had disappeared, Marie's body was found at the foot of a grassy embankment off of the hard shoulder of the M50. She had been stabbed in the neck and had suffered a fractured jaw from a blow to the left side of her head. Her cause of death was from hemorrhage due to a penetrative wound to the left side of the neck involving the jugular vein. She had not been sexually assaulted. The police believe that she had been killed within 15 minutes of making the emergency call. Due to the blood at the scene, they believed that she had been attacked during the phone call in a totally opportunist incident. The attack had taken place in broad daylight whilst dozens of cars were speeding past. They believed that the killer had then bundled Marie into their car, driven further down the motorway before screeching to a stop and reversing through a break in the roadside crash barrier. Marie was then pushed down the embankment where she bled to death. The baby that she had been expecting 7 weeks later also died alongside his mother. As all calls to the emergency phone lines were logged and kept open until the caller placed the phone back into place, the tapes were analysed to review any possible clues from background noise. A car could be heard pulling up and a male voice heard. A police reconstruction was completed, with children of police officers playing Georgina and Mark, and a young police officer wearing a maternity dress and padding stood for 2 hours at the phone box from which Marie was abducted in the hope of jogging someone's memory. Police stopped all motorists who were passing on that stretch of road during this time. The police also appealed for the family who had stopped to try help Georgina and Mark to come forward. Around 75 calls were received by the police with possible sightings and information. Some consistent information began to emerge. A larger than average family saloon, silver or grey in colour and in good condition, had been seen by numerous people near to where the emergency call was made and also near to where Marie's body had been found. Detective Chief Superintendent David Cole, head of West Mercia CID, stressed that it is now vital that we receive further information about this car. This was the 80th murder inquiry that he had led, having successfully closed 78 cases. By the 24th of June, this car was linked to a man who was described as being in his 20s with blonde spiked hair that was possibly bleached and with thin, sharp features and a prominent nose. An artist's impression of this person was released. It was believed that they were wearing a blue and white striped shirt and either a jacket or light coloured trousers were hanging on a coat hanger inside the rear offside window of the saloon car. On the 25th of June, a man in his early 30s was arrested in Mid Glamorgan, Wales. Edward Owen Browning was a labourer, part-time bouncer and a former Welsh guardsman who was known for solving his problems with violence. He drove a silver-coloured C registration Renault 25. Similar to Marie, Edward's wife Julie was also 7 months pregnant. On the 29th of June, Edward appeared in court where he was charged with Marie's murder. He claimed that he was innocent of all charges and was then granted legal aid. As the investigation progressed, Edward's solicitor hit out at the delays in carrying out forensic tests on Edward's vehicle, saying that a bail application would likely be made once the detailed forensic tests on traces of human blood found in the car were completed. When the results were eventually received, they were inconclusive as the sample was too small to be accurately analysed. There was no bail application. On the 18th of July, Edward's wife Julie prematurely gave birth to a daughter who was named Hannah. 2 days later, Marie and her unborn son, who her and Adrian had planned to call Anthony, were laid to rest. Whilst waiting for the case to go to court, Edward went on a hunger strike at Winson Green Prison in Birmingham to protest at the Home Office's refusal to move him to Cardiff Jail near his home in Treorchy, Mid Glamorgan. At trial, the prosecution claimed that Edward had decided to go to Scotland on the day of the murder after having an argument with his pregnant wife. He had drunk at least 7 pints of lager, and they claimed that he was in a willful, compulsive and reckless frame of mind when he set off on the journey which would have taken him along the M50. They said that several witnesses had seen a C registration Renault 25 driven by a fair-haired man at the time of the murder. The police then contacted 480 owners of silver or grey Renault 25s, and it was established that Edwards was the only one that could have been on the M50 at that time. Edward's father also testified that on the day in question, Edward had asked him the best way to Scotland, and he had told his son a route that included the M50. The prosecution also claimed that Edward must have used the M50 as stills taken from the video surveillance of the Severn Bridge showed that no Renault 25s had crossed during the time in question. The prosecution went on to state that, after the murder, Edward had continued to Scotland, where he removed the blood from his car, dumped the murder weapon and the clothes that he had been wearing at the time of the attack. These were never found. Bouncers, or security door staff, who worked with Edward became suspicious of his behaviour, when they were watching a newsflash about the murder that showed the sketch of the attacker, at which point Edward became very angry and aggressive. One of the bouncers thought he would test Edward by falsely saying that he had lost his own flick knife and asking about Edward's butterfly knife, to which Edward replied, "Funny thing, I've lost mine as well." A tyre expert, Richard Grogan, said that he believed that the 20-foot skid mark on the hard shoulder close to where Marie's body was found was made by Edward's car. After examining the skid mark and the tyre from Edward's car, he said that he had no hesitation in saying that tyre left the mark. The defence admitted that Edward had been drinking that day, saying that he was drunk but not falling down. Edward said that he had no recollection of his father giving him a route to Scotland, stating that he travelled on the M4 across the Severn Bridge and that he had not been on the M50 at all. He said that whilst he did own a knife, he had lost it several days before the murder. The defence argued that there was no forensic evidence to link Edward to the murder, and the case against him was purely circumstantial. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning a unanimous verdict of guilty. Edward showed no emotion as he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 25 years. However, he continued to protest his innocence, and an appeal was lodged. He launched a campaign from his prison cell, drawing up a petition that his family and friends circulated, gathering around 100 signatures. They planned to send it to the House of Lords in a bid to get his case reopened. In 1991, his counsel claimed that his conviction should be quashed on the basis of it being unsafe and unsatisfactory, whilst the Crown's counsel argued that his trial was scrupulously fair. As it was confirmed that he had lost his appeal, he struggled with police officers in the dock, shouting, "I am innocent. This is Machiavellian justice." The following year, it was reported that West Mercia police had admitted that it appeared that Edward's defence team were not made aware of a video recording of a vital witness under hypnosis. Police Inspector Peter Clark had driven past what we now know was the crime scene on the M50 that day. Peter saw Marie's car and a second car and assumed someone had broken down and was being assisted. He was off duty and did not stop, obviously unaware of what was actually happening. When Peter was interviewed under hypnosis, he contradicts some of the evidence that he later gave in court. For example, he recalled the number plate of the car as C856HFK whilst under hypnosis, when the number plate actually was C754VAD. Peter said that he felt the hypnosis was a sham and that the only detail of the number plate he was sure of was the C. The interview was recorded and, according to the prosecution, was worthless and did not affect Peter's testimony. The defence argued the opposite. After the interview, Peter went on to assist with the artist's impression, and days later Edward was arrested, bearing a remarkable likeness to the sketch. However, during 5 identity parades, no other witnesses identified Edward as the man who they had seen. Due to the contradiction between Peter's testimony and the recorded interview, the Home Secretary at the time, Kenneth Clarke, ordered a review of the case. At this review, it was also argued that a Renault 25 may have been on the Severn Bridge at the relevant time that evening. If this was Edward, he would not have been on the M50 at the time of the murder. Whilst the prosecution maintained that they were totally confident that no Renault 25s appeared in the stills produced from the video for that period in time, the president of the Renault Owners Club, Hector Mackenzie Wintle, said that he had used the actual video, not stills, to identify a Renault 25 crossing the bridge at 7:36 p.m. A video enhancement expert told the court how the technique used to produce the original trial stills could dramatically change the shape and colour of the car from the video. On the 13th of May 1994, the appeal court quashed Edward's conviction, making him a free and innocent man. He said that he planned to sue the police. After his release, he was given an interim compensation of £75,000. He went on a 2-month spending spree, splashing out on a Caribbean holiday, expensive car, and heavy drinking. He eventually received damages believed to be in excess of £600,000. Edward decided to use this money to buy a remote farmhouse where he could live with his new wife, Merridiel Thompson. Marie's husband, Adrian Wilks, said that he was shocked and distressed at the conviction being quashed, but would not comment further. Edward was in trouble with the law again in 2005, where he was cleared of unlawfully carrying an illegal knife in a public place. He argued that he needed it for work on his farm and had forgotten that it was in his pocket. He admitted driving while 3 times the legal limit, but claimed that friends had spiked his drink without his knowledge. He died in 2018 at the age of 63. Marie's murder officially remains unsolved. That concludes today's case. Please subscribe if you're new to the channel and click like and comment down below. Okay, time for petty crime now. Phineas 117 from Illinois has sent in Jinx, a 3-year-old blue Siamese. He loves rain, snowflakes and leaves, but is petrified by thunder. I mean truly petrified, bless him. Thanks Jinx and Phineas. A long-time subscriber, friend of the channel, Rose Water, and her partner Mel in October 22. She's definitely a pity, but they're not really sure what else she's mixed with. Her name is Vivian Luhu Rose Marquez, but luckily they call her Viv, amongst other names. Viv is a specialist in spinning, with her move known as Bohemian Astronaut. Some of the outside pictures are when they went to visit Bosley's backyard. It's a private play space where you can spend time with your dog. Anyway, Viv, thanks for joining Petty Crime. Cheers, Rose and Mel. Thank you for listening to the Crime Reel. Stay safe. Goodbye. Psst. I was thinking the M50 must be one of the shortest motorways in the UK, as it's only about 20 odd miles long. But lo and behold, there is a 280 metre motorway just outside Glasgow called the A8M. Goodbye.